All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unit 3 on politics. In the past couple units, we have talked about foundations of American government, we talked about colonies, revolution, and also the Constitution. And you would think the next step would be to talk about our three branches of government in detail. But before we can do that, we really have to dig into politics. All right, and I know when people hear the word politics, they usually roll their eyes because it has a very negative connotation. But for us, politics is not going to be quite so heated. Politics is going to be a little more this side believes this and this side believes this. All right, so we can define politics as the study of government and the relationship between competing interests. So not only is it between one side and the other, who has to compromise, who's not going to compromise, we're talking about two sides within a government. All right, and we see these in political parties. They take the shape of political parties. We have two political parties, but before we can talk about them, we have to define it. So we define a political party as a group of people with similar ideas about the government. That at its bare bones, that is about as simple as we can get. A political party is just a group that thinks relatively the same way about government. Now, they don't think exactly the same way, but they have some things in common. And why do they exist? There are a few reasons. The chief one, the main one, is that it organizes citizens by belief. So if someone tells you, I identify as a Democrat or I identify as a Republican, you can basically, from that sentence, you can basically tell how they feel about the government and how the government should be involved in your life just by them saying that they believe in one party or the other. All right. Number two is they connect the levels of government: national, state, and local. Federal, state, and local. Okay, so that's our upside down triangle of federalism. They can also be a watchdog. So if one party is acting a fool, the other party can act as a referee and call them out, and vice versa. The fourth one is to inform citizens. So if one party is doing something that might be a little shady and they're about to pass a law that maybe people won't like, the opposite party acts as a watchdog and informs citizens of what laws are being passed. And the last one is to raise money for candidates. If you want your party to win, you're going to have to raise money for them to get awareness for their name. Speaking of parties, we have a two-party system here in the United States, and before we can get into today's stuff, we have to figure out how it begins. So our first two parties are the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, and we spoke about them pretty briefly in terms of the Bill of Rights. Okay, so maybe you'll remember our compromises from the Constitutional Convention. So the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, as you can tell by their names, they are always in conflict. And the reason for this conflict is how to structure the Constitution. The Federalists had one idea of how the Constitution should look: just the preamble and the 7 articles, nothing else, plain Jane. And the Anti-Federalists, as we know, fussed about whether or not to add this. And I hope you know the answer because there's a question coming up. Our current two political parties, though, have morphed from Federalists and Anti-Federalists over time into Democrats and Republicans. And there is a reason that one is a donkey and one is an elephant, and we'll get to that towards the end of our lesson today. So why are they in conflict? They're not fussing over whether to add the Bill of Rights because it already exists. It's already there. That's the reason that our Constitution was ratified. Our current two parties disagree about the size of government. So how much of a hold and how much involvement in your life the government has. All right, so our two-party system is a balance between more and less government, and we'll talk about which party likes which size government here in just a second. So we have to balance between what Democrats and Republicans want, and we call keeping the balance bipartisanship. When you hear the word bipartisan, this has a very positive connotation. If you are bipartisan, that means that you are working together with another party. Even if you disagree with them, you are still willing to compromise and work with them to do what is best for the American people. All right, now sometimes people don't completely like the two parties that we have, so they wind up making a third party. Now, third parties don't really have a lot of voting power. However, they're probably not going to win, but they do not line up 100% with Democrats or Republicans. And even if they don't win, they take away votes from the similar party because it splits up the people who are voting for that party. The most prevalent, or the biggest party that we have right now that's a third party, are called the Libertarians. Not liberals, but libertarians. All right, and their mascot is the porcupine. Some other examples from history are the Know Nothings, the Dixiecrats, Bull Moose Party, Free Soil Progressives, the Tea Party, all that good stuff. But we really don't need to fool with them until American history. All right, so a quick rundown of the history of Democrats. They're established in 1792. All right, they are arguably our oldest existing party, but they look very different than they did in the 1790s. They don't look exactly the same. The issues that they talk about are very different. They created Social Security, welfare system. They signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964 after JFK was assassinated. And they also favor increased government regulation and programs. And they also are okay with spending more government money. And here are some notable Democrats. And on the flip side, we've got a history of Republicans. They are established in 1854. Sometimes you will hear Republicans called the GOP. That stands for the Grand Ole Party. President Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president in the 1860s. And he also has the first African American and the first woman elected to the national level. So that is a notable thing about Republicans. They favor decreased government involvement, so smaller government, and therefore, if you got smaller government, you don't have to have a big budget. All right, so what makes up a party's beliefs? How do we know, apart from more government and less government, how do we know what makes up a party's beliefs? Well, on one hand, you have a plank, which is one small belief of a party. An example of this would be how a party feels about gun control, or how they feel about gay marriage, or how they feel about the environment. That is just one small little piece of how they feel about issues. Now, a platform is all the beliefs put together. So an example of a Democratic plank would be that they are very pro-environment, and their platform overall is that they want more government. On the flip side, Republicans they're not really anti-environment, they're just kind of indifferent on the environment and policies that protect the environment, and their platform would be less government involvement in your life. So the way to remember this, only one person can walk the plank, so the plank is only one part of their beliefs. A platform is made up of multiple pieces of wood, okay? So a platform has all of their beliefs put together. All right, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty of what they believe. All right, so we've got Democrats on the left and Republicans on the right, and you have the exact amount of bullets that I do, so please fill in accordingly. All right, so donkeys on one side and Republicans on the other. Our first one, Democrats favor more government, and overall Republicans favor less government. This is our platform. All right, and now here come the planks. All right, pro-choice for Democrats and pro-life for Republicans. This has to do with the issue of abortion. So Democrats believe that when we say pro-choice, they mean choice of the mom, okay? So the lady who is pregnant has the choice on whether or not to abort that pregnancy or essentially get rid of the fetus. All right, now Republicans are pro-life, so they do not believe that mom should be able to choose that because the life inside of them is the fetus has rights as well and should be allowed to live. Now, there are also plenty of opinions that are in the middle of these and are not just yes or no, okay? Also, you do not have to line up 100% with any of these. It's just a suggestion, okay? This is just baseline how they feel, all right? Democrats typically like public schools, whereas Republicans like charter. Charter schools are kind of like public, except they get to be a little more choosy on who they let in and how their curriculum is shaped and kind of how they spend their money. Which sounds like a great idea until you realize they can choose to not let people in. So on the one hand is public, on the other is charter. Since Democrats like more government, they also like higher taxes to pay for said government. And Republicans, on the other hand, in true opposite fashion, like lower taxes. All right. Democrats are pro-gun control. All right. And Republicans are typically anti-gun control. The Democrats like a smaller military. Now, this goes against their platform of more government, but they do like a smaller military overall. And Republicans like a stronger military, which, if you notice, goes against their less government. Big military equals big government, but they overall want less government. Now, not all these planks have to match up completely with their platform. Next one is healthcare. All right, Democrats are pro-public healthcare, so all people have equal access to this, and there should be one public healthcare system. we know that our public health care system as Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act. Now, Republicans think that people should be able to choose their own private health care. We should not have one national system. People should be able to have it private and make their own choices, right? And there are pros and cons to both. And Democrats, since they like more government, they have more government spending, right? The government spending money comes from taxes, so those higher taxes fund more government spending. And you probably went ahead and guessed it, Republicans want less government spending overall. And like I said before, Democrats are pro-environment, so they favor a lot of policies and laws that are going to protect national parks and protect emissions that come out of cars, so like exhaust fuel or exhaust fumes, excuse me. They're also big on clean water and clean air, so they won't allow cities to pollute the air around you. All right, and now Republicans are not anti-environment. Let's be very clear on that. They are indifferent on environmental policy. So when it comes to their top 10 things that they have to worry about, the environment doesn't really make the list for them. All right, Democrats favor what are called labor unions. They are pro-labor union. All right, in North Carolina, we are not allowed to have a labor union. If you think back, here recently, North Carolina had, people called it a strike, but it really wasn't. It was a teacher march, okay? So all of our teachers took a personal day and marched to the Capitol to speak with our legislators so that they could increase the budget for school spending. So a labor union is basically a group of people. This is in your margin on the left-hand side, so make sure you're defining this as we go. All right, so labor unions are just a group of people who have the same job. That's all, okay? Now, benefits to labor unions are that if you don't like your working conditions, all of you together as a union, all combined, can decide to go on strike if you don't like what your boss is doing for you until your boss meets your demands and the two of you can compromise. All right. On the other hand, Republicans are not a fan of labor unions. They are pro-business. Okay, you can probably think of this as Democrats are pro-employee and the Democrats are pro-employer. Okay, so the worker here and the owner here. All right, we're getting close, I promise. Okay, Democrats are pro-affirmative action, and Republicans are anti-affirmative action. So affirmative action is a government program that allows people of color or people who have been discriminated against by the government over time to have a better shot at employment or at an education. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to Supreme Court cases. All right, and overall, Democrats have a liberal mindset and Republicans have a conservative mindset. And we'll talk about this in a second when we get to the political spectrum, which is now. All right, this is organizing parties based on how much government they support. And remember, you don't have to agree with all of the parties' blanks. So on this line over here, on the left side, we're going to put more government, and on the right side, we're going to put less government. All right, so if you've ever heard of somebody like, oh, they lean too far to the left in their politics, or they lean too far to the right, this is what they mean on the political spectrum. So on the left is more government, on the right is more government. In the middle, we have people called moderates. All right, so they agree with some things that the Democrats like and some things that Republicans like. Okay, a little bit further down, more government, are Democrats, and you know what's coming next. All right, well, maybe not. So some notable Democrats here, Hillary Clinton. All right, and then Republicans are on the right-hand side of the political spectrum. And our current president, Donald Trump, is a Republican. All right, a little further left are socialists. All right, they favor more government involvement in your life and in the economy. A notable socialist would be Bernie Sanders. He ran for the Democratic nominee for president in 2016. A little further right are libertarians. They are pro as little government as possible, and as little government interference in your life as humanly possible. Okay, that's what they want. Some notable people who are kind of almost libertarians are Paul Ryan, who was our former Speaker of the House of Representatives, so the leader of the House, and Ben Carson, who also ran for president for a brief time in 2016. And on the far left, as much government involvement in your life as possible are communists, and as far right, so no government at all, are anarchists. Anarchists. All right, and on the left, we have a liberal mindset, which means that are okay with the government taking more choices from you, and you are okay with change at a very fast pace. On the right-hand side is a conservative mindset. Make sure you draw these arrows on your own, okay? A conservative mindset. Okay, you're okay with more choices. Go away, little box. Go away. All right, so we've already talked about this. Here's the cartoon where it comes from. All right, and so for party voting, a straight ticket, when we talk about a ballot, you vote for all the candidates of the exact same party that you are, regardless of how they believe, and a split ticket is voting for a mix of candidates from both parties. And this has been Political Parties.